All right, hello and welcome to Factoring when A is 1. This is the start of our second unit of Math 2. Let's get started. All right, so during this lesson, I will learn how to multiply two binomials together. So binomial is just a two-term thing, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. Convert from the standard form of a quadratic to the factored form of a quadratic. All right. So quadratic is a polynomial with the biggest exponent being 1. So what that means is I'm going to have some expression or equation where I'm going to get a variable raised to the second power. If I have any variable raised to a higher power, it's not quadratic, it's something else. It's some other polynomial. A binomial is a polynomial with two terms, so it'd be something like this. 3 plus x. There's two terms, binomial. A trinomial is a polynomial with three terms. It would be something like this. Negative 4x squared plus 7x minus 5. I have 1, 2, 3 terms. Remember, terms are separated by addition and subtraction. Lastly, we have the factored form, which is a form of the quadratic in which the quadratic is made up of factors. This form is beneficial because when each factor is set to 0, you can solve for the x-intercepts of the quadratic. It's usually something like this. We'd get x plus r1 multiplied by x plus r2. Notice two binomials, binomial, there's two of them, and they're being multiplied together. All right, let's get started. So remember, in mathematics, anything that you do, you should be able to reverse it somehow. So these are just some opposites that we already have. We know that addition is the opposite of subtraction, and the opposite of subtraction is addition. Those addition and subtraction go together, as well as multiplication and division. Multiplication is the opposite of division, and division is the opposite of multiplication. Okay, and these are the two that we're really going to deal with these next few lessons. The opposite of factoring is distribution, and the opposite of distribution is factoring. Okay, so that's the concept that we're going to kind of look at. Now, we know how to distribute. If I take this a right here, right, this is going to be my green arrow, and I multiply, well, first I have my a times my b. We get ab here. Then a times c gives me ac. That's how I would distribute, correct? All right. Well, what if I have two binomials? What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the first term in the binomial, and I'm going to make sure that I multiply it, which is what I'm doing when I'm distributing. I'm multiplying. I'm going to distribute it to the x. So x times x is x squared. Distribute this x to that 5, which gives me negative 5x. 3 times x gives me positive 3x. And 3 times a negative 5 gives me negative 15. So I distribute it. The only step that's missing here is to combine my like terms. So I'd have x squared, negative 5x plus 3x gives me a negative 2x minus 15. All right. So this was kind of what we did is something called the FOIL method. So it's called FOIL because FOIL is an acronym. Okay, it helps us remember the order in which we're going to solve or which we're going to distribute, but it only works when I'm multiplying two binomials together. So here's the key. So I got my FOIL right here, right? So FOIL, the F in FOIL stands for first, meaning you're going to take the first term in each binomial and multiply it together. And the O stands for outside, meaning the outermost terms we multiply together. I is inside, meaning the innermost terms, and L is the last term in each binomial we multiply together. Now remember, this can only be used when you're multiplying two binomials together. This does not work if I have a trinomial involved or another type of polynomial. It only works for two binomials. All right, let's practice this. See an example first. So my first one is the first term multiplied by the first term, which gives me x squared. Okay, Then we get to the outside. So this case, this is like my green. X is on the outside and 8. It gives me negative 8x. Okay, we get our inside. Right there, negative 2 and x are on the inside of this. And then, of course, we have our last, negative 2, negative 8. Those are my last ones. Once again, we would combine my like terms to be able to simplify this. All right, so just we had a refresher on distribution. Now we're going to do the opposite of distribution and factor something, okay? Now, factoring is the opposite of distribution. We know that. When factoring, so if I have a quadratic in standard form and I want to move it to factored form, I have to factor it. So it converts a quadratic from standard form to factored form. So we're going to start out with something like this, ax squared plus bx plus c, and we want to get it to be x plus m multiplied by x plus n. That is our goal. All right. So I have my standard form. So we're factoring when a is equal to 1. So remember, my standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c. So the very first thing is we're going to identify all of these components. So notice my a is in front of the x squared. If there's no number in front of the x squared, that means that a is 1. We like it when a is 1, and you're going to see why today and probably realize it more in the next lesson. The next thing is b. Well, I noticed that b is a negative 11. And then c is my constant term. I got to include if that's a positive or negative, so it's a positive 18. Okay, so I have my setup. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to see what I get when I multiply a times c. So 1 multiplied by 18. So we get 18, okay? So below this, I'm going to create a list of all the things that multiply together to be 18, okay? Now, I always start with a 1. So I always say 1 times 18. 1's always going to be able to be in there. Then I move to 2. Can 2 be multiplied to be 18? It can. 2 times 9. And I check for 3. Well, 3 times 6. Can 4? Nope, that doesn't work. 5 doesn't work. And then we're back up at 6 right there. So 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, and 18. Those are my factors, meaning the things that I can divide out of 18. Get rid of some of this right here. Okay. Now we want to see what can be added to be a negative 11. All right. Which is my b term. All right. Well, I need something to add together to be negative 11. So what I have to realize is that going this step over here again is either both terms have to be positive or both terms have to be negative. And you could write down all those. I could say negative 1 times negative 18, negative 2 times negative 9, negative 3 times negative 6, if that helps you. I usually just try to figure out where my positives and negatives are in this next step based on, because it's going to determine on this b term up here. So I know that if I add something together and it needs to stay being negative and they multiply to be a positive, that both numbers will be negative. So I'm going to say negative 1 minus 18, negative 2 minus 9, and negative 3 minus 6. And I'm going to see what those equal. So negative 1 minus 18 gives me a negative 19. Negative 2 minus 9 is negative 11. And negative 3 minus 6 is negative 9. Do any of those work? Okay, so negative 19, is that negative 11? Nope. Negative 2 and negative 9? Yep, that's negative 11. Negative 3, negative 6? Nope, negative 19. So what I know is that negative 2 and negative 9 are my factors here. So when I factor this now, I'm going to say x and then x, and what I'm going to include is minus 2, and I got that from up here, and minus 9. And I got that from up there. And my little note here is use the FOIL method to check to see if you factored correctly. Because right now we're saying that this is my factor. Okay, so x minus 2 and x minus 9. So I'm going to switch pages here real quick. And we're going to check. So I'm saying x minus 2 times x minus 9 is equal to x squared minus 11x plus 18. That's what I'm trying to prove. So let's use our FOIL method. Just to double check to make sure we did this right. X times x is x squared. There's my first. Now my outermost, x times 9, gives me negative 9x. My innermost, negative 2x. And then my last, negative 2 times negative 9 is a positive 18. I'm going to combine my innermost here, x squared minus 11x plus 18. And it worked, right? Perfect. Notice that 9 and 2 came into play when I distributed that out. Alright, so I want you guys to try now. X squared plus 7x plus 12. So pause the video real quick and try and determine if this is, so you can factor it. Alright, let's look at this. So the first thing is I'm going to identify my a, b, and c. A comes from the number in front of the x squared. That's just 1. B comes from that term in front of the x. It's a positive 7. And c is my constant. It's a positive 12. So we want to multiply to be a times c. So that's 12. Now I'm going to say, all right, it's going to be 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4. We bring that back around, 4, 6, and 12. Okay, so we're good. Now I want to add to be 7. So we get 1 plus 12, 2 plus 6, and 3 plus 4. I know that both of these have to be positive because it's going to add to be positive, and when I multiply, it's a positive number. So either both numbers have to be, so in this step right here, either both numbers have to be positive to multiply to give me a positive 12, or both numbers have to be negative. So I know it's positive or negative. But since they have to add to be a positive 7, they obviously have to be, both numbers have to be positive. They can't be negative. All right, so 1 plus 12, 13, that doesn't work. 2 plus 6, 8, that doesn't work. 3 plus 4, there's my 7. Ding ding, that works. Okay, so when I factor this now, I have x plus 3, pulling that from right there, times x plus 4. We got that plus 4 from right there. There's my factored form. Okay, we're going to try one more. I want you to try this one as well. X squared plus 3x minus 10. All right, let's go through this. We're going to identify my a, my b, and my c. My a is 1. My b is a positive 3. My c is a negative 10. So we have our first negative c value, which is going to change things slightly. We just have to see a pattern here. All right, so we need to multiply to be a negative 10. All right, so I have 1 and 10. Notice I'm not going to worry about the negative quite yet. I'm going to wait until this step, my next step, to determine my positives and negatives, and you'll see why. 2 and 5, 3 can't go into it, 4 can't go into it, and there's my 5. Okay. All right. So next, this is where I'm going to figure out my addition and subtraction. It needs to add to be a positive 3. So here's the thing. On this step right here, this multiplied to be negative 10, I know to multiply to get a number, one number has to be positive And one number has to be negative. That's the only way I can multiply to get a negative number when I'm multiplying with two numbers. So I know that if I want to add them together and have it stay positive, my bigger number has to be positive, because if my bigger number is negative, when I add the two numbers together, then my resulting answer will be negative. But if I have my bigger number positive, when I add the positive number and the negative number, if my bigger number is positive, then the resulting answer will be positive. Let's look at this. And if you need to, you can sort this out. You can say positive 1 minus 10, negative 1 plus 10, positive 2 minus 5, and negative 2 plus 5. Either way, that works. I know that since this is positive, of the two numbers, my bigger number has to be positive. So I know it's either going to be this one or this one for it to be positive. But if you need to write all the different ways it could be, that's totally fine. So like 1 minus 10 would give me a negative 9. See, my bigger number is negative. That means my resulting answer is going to be negative. Negative 1 plus 10, there's a positive 9. See, bigger numbers positive, resulting answer is going to be positive. Negative 3 there, positive 3 here. All right, so that doesn't work, that doesn't work, that doesn't work. That one works. Okay, now I can say x minus 2. Remember, we get the 2 from here. X plus 5. We got that positive 5 there. There's my factored form. We can, if you want to test it, go ahead and factor it and test it. If you have any questions about how this was done, or you want to know more about it, please come and talk to me, or come find a tutor, and we'd be happy to help. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and come let me know if you need help. Thanks.